everybody, and welcome to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast. I'm Pete Chianca, here as always with Dave London. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Pete.
We are back after, I guess, what you might call a COVID hiatus.
COVID podcast hiatus.
Yes, we have been socially distancing from our podcast for the last couple of months as we were working on some other projects, but we are very eager to get back into it and talk to cartoonists and illustrators and other fun folks from all over the place. So we'd encourage you to keep checking back at petpeevescomic.com, the home of the comic strip that Dave draws and I write, Pet Peeves. And we also have a page there for our podcast where you're probably listening to this right now. So make it a point to check back. We're going to try to do these once a month again, as we used to back in pre-pandemic days. And in the meantime, we had a good reason for coming back for this one. We got to talk to Cagen Luse, who is one of the talented cartoonists behind the Comics in Color Festival, which is coming to Boston later in April of 2021, and is a convention and festival meant to spotlight cartoonists and illustrators and storytellers of color. And it's really timely and really interesting, and we're going to talk to him after the break in just a few minutes, and you'll get to learn all about that. But Dave, let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing during our sort of pandemic quarantine the last few months.
Speaking of drawing and writing, we are about to introduce. So Pete,
Ta-da! Yes,
it's
I'm sorry.
Raise it up. Yeah.
It was like dramatic, time. This is our new book, our second collection of Pet Peeves comic strips. It's called More Social Than Distant, a Pet Peeves quarantine collection, which probably gives you the idea. We tackle the COVID crisis in our book. It sort of deals with our comic strip family, the Peeves, and how they have been dealing with quarantines and social distancing and masking and having a bubble and all the things we've all been dealing with for the last year. And as you know, if you follow the show, we had a really good episode a few months back talking to other cartoonists who decided pretty early on to sort of tackle those topics in their comics. And we decided very early on that, we're just going to have our characters, live through it just like we are. And I think, and it was fun doing it, one at a time, but seeing them all together in the book, it really felt like a cohesive story to me in terms of what this family had to deal with. And I think people will be able to relate to it.
And if somebody wanted to say buy the book, where would they go to do that?
Oh, well, I'm so glad you asked, Dave. You can go to our website, petpeevescomic.com. You'll see links right at the top of the page. We also have a books page, petpeevescomic.com/books. And those will take you to amazon.com. It's a little company. I don't know if you've heard of it. They sell things. And they sell our books, both of them, our Pet Peeves initial collection and this new book. You could search for Pet Peeves by London and Chianca, and you will see us on Amazon. You can pick it up right from there. Also, Dave and I will be, once as the world opens up, we will be venturing out, looking for some public events and appearances where we'll be able to sell you a signed book and shake your hand, or at least bump elbows, do it, maybe bump fists. And you'll find an email address, which is petpeevescomic@gmail.com, on our website, where you could contact us about getting autographed copies in case you are a collector of such things. How about that? Did that cover it?
And that's perfect. And if you don't want to wait for the next comic event, just reach out to us now, where we're happy to get you an autographed copy soon.
Excellent. All right. Well, we don't want to keep our guest waiting any longer. Cagen Luse is waiting in the wings. We're going to take a very quick break and then come back with him and learn all about comics in color. Thanks, everybody. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast with Pete Chianca, that's me, and my co-host, Dave London. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Pete.
We are back with our very special guest. We're so excited to talk to him today, Mr. Cagen Luse. Hello, Cagen.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's really our pleasure. And I was actually surprised I hadn't heard about this great event that you're planning until recently. And when I saw it, I was like, we gotta talk to this guy about this. We're, for the people who don't know, or I don't, if you've listened before, I think you would know, but both Dave and I are Boston area folks, and been up here for a long time. And Cagen also is a Boston area cartoonist, and his work appears in Dig Boston, which is a terrific alternative paper
Yes.
in Boston and online, of course. And he and some other folks are planning something called Comics in Color for later this month. And well, why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of how that started and what the mission of that festival is?
Okay, well, Comics in Color is kind of two different things. Comics in Color is a monthly meetup series that we used to do at the Grove Hall Library when you could actually meet in person, and now is on Zoom. And then we have the Boston Comics in Color Festival, which is a 3-day festival happening here in Roxbury and virtually, um, highlighting stories by and about people of color. So the monthly sessions were more, we would do workshops and have featured artists come in and kind of talk about their work, about process, and kind of developing young artists and fans. And then the festival is kind of the big culmination of everything that we've been working on. We're doing 2 days of virtual programming. We have folks from all over the country joining us for panels. And then on April 24th, which is a Saturday, we're going to have an open air market at the Roxbury Community College in a parking lot, because now, everything has to be outdoors.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be great. We're going to have vendors and, be very COVID aware and socially distant and all of that.
That's great, and it's so, and just to talk a little bit about the mission, it's an opportunity for cartoonists of color primarily to be give them a forum to tell their stories and to compare notes, and to sort of just get their work out there in a forum that maybe hasn't been especially available in the past.
That's right. I mean, folks of color have been underrepresented in comics for a long time, but there's been a movement that's definitely come in the last about 5 or 6 years to kind of create this independent comic world. So how Comics in Color started, I'll just kind of give you the rundown, is my partner Barrington Edwards and I, we were two comic nerds who found each other exhibiting art together, and we're just so excited to find one another. And then we heard about this comic festival in New York called the Black Comic Book Festival that happens at the Schomburg Center in Harlem. So we hopped on a bus and went down there and walked into a room, and it was just eye-opening to see so many people of color enjoying comics and making comics. So we said on the way home, we were talking and said, this has to happen in Boston. It was such a great experience to be there and feel a part of this community, that I wanted to build this in Boston. So it took a little while. We talked over it and wrestled with it back and forth. But then when the movie Black Panther came out, it felt like that was the moment, right? So all of a sudden, these stories were become more interesting, and it was kind of blowing up. So we said, this is the moment. So we just put a call out there to let's all get together at the library, and folks came, and originally it was just us sitting around. Literally, I brought some of the comics I had. We sat around, we read them, we talked about them, and it kind of has developed since then into something much bigger, and now the festival.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, and I've watched since we knew you were coming on a couple of the other presentations you've done and read up a little bit. And I like, so you do, in addition to doing lunchtime comics in Dig Boston, you did a book called The Racially Ambiguous Guidebook.
Yes.
And you talk about how maybe because you don't necessarily present as Black,
Right.
you are able to. There's a certain amount of privilege that comes along with that. And I
Absolutely.
remember you saying about how that might allow you to open doors and bring people in with you.
Yes. If
Who,
I can, if my light skin privilege, as I call it, opens any doors for me, I would like to use that to bring in other folks of color to this world, which I just love so much. And the racially ambiguous guidebook is really about my own personal experiences as a racially ambiguous person. And I just felt like no one had really explored that, kind of being in the center and not, people asking you all the time, what are you, where are you from? And since I've put this book out there, it's been amazing that so many other people identified with that experience. And not, it's not just people of color, racial ambiguity kind of is across the board. People can't, if you're not immediately apparent where you're from or what race you are, then people question it. And it was kind of a universal, not a universal, but a lot of people have had that same experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess, what are some of the other, if you had to list goals of the festival, what do you want to, sort of see? This is the first one.
This is
So
the first one.
what do you want to see sort of coming out the other end of it?
Well,
The second one.
The second one, right?
That's,
the first.
That's the top of the list. We want another one of these things.
The first one was the one that never happened, which was like, it was rough. But I guess the ultimate goal of the festival is kind of develop a network and community of artists in color to kind of uplift artists of color, to get more people of color telling their stories, writing comics, drawing comics, just feeling like their stories matter. And so yeah, ultimately it's just to create kind of a community here for folks to support one another and get their stories out.
Yeah, I mean, you really do get the sense. I mean, you could imagine how many stories have sort of gone untold over the years just because the opportunity, wasn't there.
Right. Yeah, we've so in our like I was saying before, our monthly sessions, we would do comic workshops where we would do comic prompts or some simple things like that. But we had a lot of kind of younger kids, and they just dove right into it and were awesome. But we also had like some grandparents and parents come along, and because they were there, they would try it out or something. But this one of the stories I love is there's this older woman who brought her grandson there, and she had never written a comic before in her life. And we were just doing a little exercise, and she was sitting over there in the corner just drawing away and drawing away. And I was watching her, and I was like, I just went over there and looked at her and asked her to share what she had drawn. And it was this amazing comic. She had done all this just like little line art drawings about her story, about her where she was born, her growing up, her getting married, her having children, grandchildren. It was the story of her entire life in like this couple of pages. And she was like, I had never drawn comics before because I never thought I could do it. And it was just this amazing moment of someone like really discovering that they, the power is in their hands to tell their story.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. Had she come like with her grandson or something?
Yeah, she had brought her grandson.
That's awesome. That is great. What has been generally, what's your sense, coming from the Roxbury community and the Boston community in terms of, how they're reacting to this stuff you've done previously and the fact that this is coming to Roxbury?
Everyone has been really supportive and really excited about this. It's something different, something that's kind of never really happened in this community before. And there's been a lot of excitement from people that I, just meet on the street. There's a lot of excitement on social media. So, I think that'll carry through to make a really exciting and fun event that will continue annually. I mean, I'm hoping that this is the first or second, depending on how you look at it, of a long line of comics and color festivals.
And you talk about, and just talking about the timing, this has obviously been such a hard year, in terms of racial justice, but also, something of a watershed year. You feel like, has there finally been, a corner turned here in terms of awareness, and people willing to sort of speak out and make a difference. So I guess how could, comics and comic strips and this type of, expression sort of help that goal or that movement, do you think?
Well, I think comics have always been part of political movements, and I think it's what's so great about comics is that anybody can do it, anybody can tell their story, and there's a lot of stories that need to be told. And I really believe that, the more diverse the storytelling, the better for everyone, not just people of color, but for everybody across the board. And I think that now is really a time when people are more open to receiving more diverse stories and wanting to learn more about other cultures and how other people live. So I think this is a perfect time to have an event like this and tell these stories.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's surprising for people who haven't read comics or haven't read graphic novels, for instance, what an impact that type of storytelling can have. I know I read recently, there's that 3-volume biographical, I guess autobiographical graphic novel about John Lewis,
Yes.
that he wrote it, or at least told the story, and several artists collaborated to draw it. And what an amazing job it does of telling his life story. It has the impact, of you get the sense of that lived experience through those drawings and his words.
Yeah, and sometimes for like historical text, it's much easier for people to digest if it's not just a bunch of words on a page, if you have pictures moving along the story. So I think it's a really good tool for learning, and especially learning history. I know that David Walker, who's a author I really like, just did a graphic novel about the Black Panthers and kind of the
Mhm.
history and the beginnings of the Black Panthers. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I bet that sounds excellent. I bet that's really good.
Yes, and one of our folks that we're featuring there, Joel Christian Gill, who's also
Mhm.
a local guy. He taught at Mass Art. I don't think he's teaching there. He's moved to someplace else now, I believe. But he also does a lot of historic comic art about the Talented Tenth. He did Bessie Smith and oh God, why did I? Bass Reeves, the Black Cowboy. So he's done a bunch of that too, and I think they're really good vehicles for learning as well as enjoyment.
Yeah, he's terrific. I have one of his Strange Fruit compilations.
Yes, yes, yes.
Dave and I met him at one of the I think the Boston Kids Comic Fest, back when you were allowed to leave your house and actually meet different people who you don't know.
I
Uh,
know, I miss it.
yeah, well, we'll be back. We'll be back soon enough. Well, this sounds like a really good sort of tiptoe back into that outdoors. I'm sure everybody will be masked up and spaced apart, but you'll still be at least an opportunity to, see other people and see other people's work.
Yeah, I felt like the in-person part was really important, even though it's been, it would have been easier just to do a virtual festival at this point. But I felt like the being in the space with people and meeting the authors, face to face, well, 6 feet apart, face to face, but, I felt like that was really an important part of the festival, and I didn't want to not have that, even if it's, somewhat pulled back from what we'd like it to be. Like in the 2020 festival that never was, we had so many exciting performances and all these other pieces. We were going to have like live art and, happening on the scene, but we can't really do that this time. It's going to be more of a, controlled environment because of the COVID. But I still think that it's a really important part of the experience of a con or a festival.
Right. And it's, it'll get you out of the gate. And then
Right.
hopefully if everything is back to somewhat normal a year from now, you have that, you just sort of go out gangbusters and be able to do all that other stuff, knowing how to plan one because you did it the year before.
Yes, 2022 is going to be it's going to be awesome.
I wanted to talk, Dave, did you have any questions about the festival? Because I did want to talk about Cagen's work also.
Yeah, let's get into Cagen's work. That's where I wanted to go next as well.
Sure.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, you do lunchtime comics, which seems to me to be a sort of is it autobiographical, I'm assuming?
Yes, yeah.
About a racially mixed family. It has sort of I mean, first of all, it's hilarious.
Thank you.
Second of all, it just, seems to, it takes a realistic approach, I'd say. Like, it really feels like a real family to me. Like, it's not, wacky or necessarily, outrageous, but it's really, it deals with the issues that particular family deals with that are sort of unique to them, but it also has universal feel to it particularly. And you tackled a ton of the COVID stuff over the last year. That's something Dave and I in our strip Pet Peeves, we made a decision very early on that, if we're dealing with this, so are our characters,
Yes.
and because it's what we were living and what the whole world was living. So I
Right.
imagine you went through a similar, thought process of trying to figure out how you were going to deal with that in the strip.
Well, funny enough, like when we first locked down, and I was kind of dealing with the cancellation of the festival, and I was feeling pretty down, and this whole new normal was happening, and it actually was very therapeutic for me to kind of
Yeah.
chronicle what was happening and help me kind of focus and not get so down about all the whole COVID thing and the festival. So it was very therapeutic, just, and I found it really, people kind of attached to it, like this is happening in my life, well, it's happening in their life too. So I do try to hit those universal themes that we all kind of experience, as well as my own personal themes.
Yeah. No, I think it's hard. I think there's a temptation to sort of go outrageous sometimes. And I know we do that occasionally. You go for the really wacky gag. Um,
Oh, I do that too. I mean, there are
yeah,
some wacky gags in
yeah,
there
you
too.
can't. It's impossible to resist when you're doing comics. But I think to get sort of that realistic, it's more satisfying in the end to read something that you can relate to. And I feel like that's lunchtime comics definitely fits into that.
Well,
For me.
I cheat a little bit on that because I do use my family for inspiration.
Oh yeah, we're
Right? A
there.
lot of these stories come out of just everyday things that happen. I'm like, oh, and I've got this list of hundreds of like little moments on my phone that I'm like, I need to write a comic about this so that I won't forget.
Yeah, that's an occupational hazard for cartoonists and their families.
Yes, yes.
Dave, I'm constantly getting texts from Dave. My kid just did this. Write it down. And vice versa. And I even have my family trade. Something funny will happen. They went, "That's a strip." Yeah, I think they're all looking out for us, which is
Family has great material. They really are always do. I mean, great material coming out of my family constantly. So
cool. Dave, did you have a question?
Well, I wanted to get into Kagan, we tend to do these questions with our guests where I tend to geek out about the materials and the tools. And so I tend to go ask the cartoonists the questions about what materials they use. And I was watching one of the videos that you had posted when we were doing some research, and I came across one where you said recently you switched to digital drawing, but you had gone old school pretty much for a while. And I wanted to ask, what tools were you using? What tools have you been using digitally, and how did you find the change, or how have you found the change to digital art to be?
well, it's a funny story because I started out lunchtime comics kind of drawing on my lunch break at work, which is where the name Lunchtime Comics comes from. So on the early days of doing the comics, it was literally like scrap paper at my desk at work. And you can sometimes, if you look closely, you can like see the stuff that was printed on the back of the other side. So it was just like, I started out with just doing pencil and then whatever pens were around. And then when it started to get a little more serious, I went out and bought some micron pens so that I could, get a little finer line. And then at some point, because I've gone through just like everything at this point, at some
Oh
point
yeah.
I switched to brush pens because I really liked the line that it gave you, and it was a little more dynamic and a little more interesting. And then I switched to digital, um, and that was great. I mean, it's really the workflow that helps with digital because there's drawing. Although I really love the inking with a brush pen and the feeling of actual drawing on paper and stuff like that. And I still, when I thumbnail out my stuff, I still do that by hand, and sometimes I'll ink it just for fun. But the workflow with digital comics is just so much faster because before I was drawing it, I have to erase out all the pencil lines underneath the ink, then scan it in. Then I'd have to go in and erase all the mistakes that I made with ink, and then color it. And so with digital, it's just you can I'll pencil it, then I'll pencil it digitally, then I'll ink it digitally, then I'll color it, and it goes a lot faster that way. And I found it to be really, really good. I have a Wacom Cintiq tablet that I just adore. It's really responsive, and the pressure sensitivity is really nice. and I really enjoy it. I've tried a couple other things, but the Cintiq is really the one that I found to work the best.
What about software? What are you using for the art?
Adobe Photoshop for the most part. I am a graphic designer as my 9 to 5 job, so I had Photoshop already, so it was just a natural thing to use that.
So have you found that you're ever doing any work with the old school pens just to have something physical to save? I mean, that's the biggest sort of that's the argument against digital, right? Is that if somebody
Right.
wants an original, there is no original. It's just a bunch of ones and zeros in the cloud.
I still really enjoy doing traditional work, so I will, you know, I'll do portraits like during Inktober or something. I will, do a bunch of ink drawings or ink portraits, and I definitely enjoy the traditional. And I'm always going to have a piece of paper and a sketchbook in front of me that's got, I'm drawing figures and stuff, working things out, and just constantly drawing. So I miss doing the traditional stuff, so I'm always doing it whenever I can.
Great. All right. Thanks so much.
Sure.
So you guys need to get into non-fungible tokens. Are you? Have you?
I have been looking into those. I don't quite understand
No.
yet or
I don't
what the
understand that.
problem is with them, because there's a lot of like I've been watching some of the chatter online, and there seems to be a big problem with like the energy consumption around it.
Yeah,
I
like
don't
it
quite
uses.
understand.
They say like the amount of computing energy it takes to make one, like heat your house for a month or something, or light your house. I've always sort of prided myself on keeping up with like the new technology, and I think we finally hit the point where I have no idea what's going on. It started with Bitcoin, and now with this thing, I'm like, okay, I'm done.
I'm so glad to hear that, because I also have no clue what is going on.
It enables you to sell a JPEG for $3 billion. I know that.
Yeah,
that sounds pretty good.
It sounds like a scam. It's some sort of
Yeah, I just remember there was some point this artist that I know was using it, and he got tons of blowback on like Twitter and stuff for using it, and I didn't understand why people were mad at him. But I guess it was the energy consumption. I don't know.
I know that seems to be part of it, and then just the idea of can you own, like they've said, these ones and zeros. It seems to be it's another one of these things where you could just say you own it, and it's
Right.
being able to say it is why it's worth all that money to people. But
Well, there's something to be said for artists getting paid for their work.
yeah,
I mean,
that's for
the
sure.
internet has been like the wild, wild west for a long time, where anybody just takes anything. So having some protection there is nice. I just don't understand how it works.
Yeah. Well, maybe we just got to hang around long enough.
Yeah, right. It'll become clear soon enough.
Eventually, we'll figure it out. All right, so we want to make sure everybody knows where to find your stuff and where to find information about Comics in Color. So I guess let's start with Lunchtime Comics first. Where could people read that if they're not familiar with it yet?
Well, as you mentioned, it's in Dig Boston, pretty regularly. It's also at lunchtimecomics.com. Also, Twitter at Lunchtime Comics, Instagram, Facebook, all just Lunchtime Comics. That's with an X, COMIX. Lunchtime
Cool.
Comics.
And I should mention, we will also, on our website, petpeevescomic.com, where we have a page for the podcast, we'll have links and samples to everything. So people, in case people didn't have time to write it down, you'll be able to find it there.
Great.
Yeah, and I recommend, just because we're all about supporting local journalism, pick up Dig Boston.
It's a great paper.
If you're ever in town, or
if you ever leave your house.
If you ever leave your house again. I used to walk by boxes all the time. Now I walk by my kitchen and my bathroom, but that's about it. But when I'm back in town, I will start picking it up again.
Just as a side note, they remind me of the boxes. I also have a comic called The Market, which is in the Boston Compass newspaper, which is kind of a very independent, small paper that's put out by Dorchester Art Project, which also has a bunch of boxes around town too to check out.
And what's the name of that one again?
It's called The Market.
Market, excellent.
Yeah, that one's about kind of a younger millennial aged guy who's kind of constantly looking for work and very cynical.
Oh,
about
that sounds like a lot of people would relate to that at this moment in time.
it. Right?
And as far as comics and color go, what do people need to know about that in terms of where to find information? Or, I assume you've set um, your lineup, but can people still get a table if they wanted to, or is it more just?
Yes, there's still tables available at the open air market on the 24th. Still a couple left, so contact us if you want to at comicsandcolor.org is where all the information is. We just released the schedule, which has all the panels and events. It's on the website now. You can also find things on Facebook at Comics and Color and Instagram and Twitter. You can find out all the information on there.
Excellent. Okay, we're so happy that you're able to join us. Best of luck with this festival. I think it's going to be great.
Thank you so much for having me. Really
And
appreciate it.
anything else you need to plug or talk about?
No, just check us out on April 22nd and 23rd online and April 24th in Roxbury.
Excellent.
It's going to be a great time.
Cagen, thank you very much. Dave, thank you as always.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
And we will be back with another episode of Strip Search, the comic strip podcast, before you know it. So visit us at petpeevescomic.com for all the latest updates. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.